A kingdom on the edge. In the summer of 1381, something extraordinary happened in England. For centuries, medieval society had been built on a strict hierarchy. Kings ruled over nobles, nobles controlled land, and peasants worked tirelessly to support the entire system. Everyone was expected to know their place. But suddenly, thousands of ordinary people decided they had endured enough. Farmers, laborers, craftsmen, and villagers began gathering in large groups across the countryside. They carried farming tools, clubs, and whatever weapons they could find. Their destination was clear: London. They were not coming to trade or celebrate. They were coming to demand change. This uprising would become known as the Peasants Revolt of 1381, one of the most dramatic rebellions in medieval English history. For a brief moment, it looked as if the entire social order of England might collapse. But to understand why this revolt happened, we first need to travel back several decades to a disaster that changed medieval England forever: the aftermath of the Black Death. When the Black Death swept through England in 1348, it devastated the population. Entire villages were wiped out, and historians estimate that nearly half of the country's people may have died during the pandemic. The catastrophe left fields abandoned, towns half empty, and landowners struggling to maintain their estates. For centuries before the plague, peasants had been tied to the land under the feudal system. Their labor supported the wealth of nobles and the stability of medieval society. But after the plague, everything began to change. With so many workers gone, labor suddenly became extremely valuable. Surviving peasants realized that their work was now essential, and many began demanding higher wages or better conditions. Some workers even left their villages to seek better opportunities elsewhere. For landowners who had long depended on cheap labor, this new situation was deeply unsettling. The old power balance was shifting, and the ruling class was determined to stop it. The government strikes back. In response to rising wages and worker mobility, the English government attempted to restore the old order. In 1351, laws were introduced to control the labor market and prevent workers from demanding higher pay. These regulations, known as the Statute of Laborers, attempted to freeze wages at the levels that existed before the Black Death. Workers were forbidden from leaving their employers without permission, and anyone who demanded higher wages could be punished. But enforcing these laws proved extremely difficult. With so many workers dead, landowners desperately needed laborers to cultivate their fields and maintain their estates. Many peasants ignored the new laws entirely, knowing that employers had little choice but to hire them. Over time, resentment grew among the ruling classes, who believed the social order was being undermined. But the greatest source of anger among ordinary people was still yet to come: the tax that sparked a revolution. In the late 1370s, England was facing another serious problem. The kingdom was involved in the long and expensive conflict with France known as the 100 Years' War. War required enormous amounts of money, and the government needed new ways to raise funds. The solution was taxation. In 1377, a new form of tax was introduced, known as the poll tax. Unlike traditional taxes based on land or wealth, this tax required every adult to pay the same fixed amount. For wealthy individuals, the payment was manageable, but for poor peasants struggling to survive, it was a heavy burden. Worse still, the tax was collected aggressively by royal officials. People who could not pay were threatened, interrogated, and sometimes punished. When a third poll tax was introduced in 1380, frustration finally began to boil over. Across villages in southern England, anger spread rapidly. Many peasants believed the tax was deeply unfair, and some began talking openly about resistance. The first spark of rebellion. The revolt began in the county of Essex in the spring of 1381. Royal officials arrived to investigate whether local villagers had properly paid the poll tax. During one of these investigations, tensions escalated dramatically. According to historical accounts, villagers refused to cooperate with the officials and drove them away. News of the confrontation spread quickly to neighboring communities. Soon, similar acts of resistance were occurring across the region. At the same time, unrest was also growing in Kent, another county southeast of London. It was here that the rebellion would find one of its most famous leaders, a man named Wat Tyler. The rise of Wat Tyler. Very little is known about Wat Tyler's early life. Like many peasants of the time, he likely worked as a craftsman or laborer. But during the uprising of 1381, he quickly emerged as a powerful and charismatic leader. Tyler helped organize groups of rebels and guided their march towards London. Under his leadership, thousands of people began traveling together, moving from village to village. As they marched, more supporters joined them. The rebels were not simply angry peasants. They had clear demands. They wanted an end to the poll tax. They wanted fair wages for their labor, and many wanted the complete abolition of the feudal system that had bound peasants to the land for generations. By the time the rebels approached London, their movement had grown into a massive force, and England's rulers were beginning to panic. The march towards London. As news of the uprising spread throughout the countryside, the rebellion began to grow at an astonishing speed. Villagers, craftsmen, and laborers left their homes and joined the movement. Some carried farming tools such as pitchforks and axes, while others brought swords or bows if they owned them. Many had no real weapons at all, but they marched with determination. Their destination was London, the political heart of the kingdom. As the rebel groups moved from village to village, their numbers increased. Along the way, they attacked symbols of authority. Tax collectors were chased away, government records were destroyed, and some manor houses were targeted by angry crowds. Yet this was not simply random violence. The rebels believed they were fighting for justice. Many of them carried letters and proclamations explaining their demands. They wanted freedom from feudal obligations, fair wages for their labor, and an end to the poll tax that had sparked their anger. By early June of 1381, thousands of rebels were moving towards the capital. England had never seen anything like it. A kingdom in panic. The English government quickly realized that the situation was becoming extremely dangerous. At the time, the King of England was still very young. Richard II was only 14 years old. Real political power was exercised by royal advisors and powerful nobles who surrounded the young king. But as reports of the rebellion continued to arrive, fear spread throughout the royal court. The rebels were not a small group of angry villagers. They were a massive force of thousands of people, and they were heading directly to London. Nobles worried that if the rebels reached the capital, the authority of the monarchy itself could be challenged. Yet there was also hesitation. Many soldiers and local officials were unsure whether they should confront the rebels directly. Some even sympathized with their complaints about taxes and economic hardship. This uncertainty gave the rebels time to continue their march, and soon they reached the gates of London. London opens its gates. In June of 1381, the rebel army finally arrived outside London. The city was protected by walls and gates, which normally could have been closed to keep invaders out. But the situation inside London was complicated. Many of the city's residents shared the frustrations of the rebels. Merchants, craftsmen, and laborers were also struggling with taxes and economic difficulties. Some Londoners secretly supported the uprising.
When the rebels arrived, several city gates were opened from the inside. Suddenly, thousands of rebels began pouring into the capital. For the first time in medieval English history, an enormous peasant army had entered the political center of the kingdom. The city quickly descended into chaos. Crowds moved through the streets targeting buildings associated with royal authority. Prisons were broken open, allowing prisoners to escape. Government offices were attacked, and important legal records were burned. The rebels believed these records represented the laws and obligations that had oppressed them for generations. Destroying them felt like destroying the system itself. Targets of the revolt. Although the rebels were angry, their actions were not entirely random. They had specific targets. One of their main enemies was the powerful royal
advisor John of Gaunt, one of the most influential nobles in England. His grand palace in London, known as the Savoy Palace, became a symbol of elite power and wealth. When rebels reached the palace, they destroyed it completely. Furniture, treasures, and luxury goods were thrown into the river or burned. But interestingly, many rebels refused to steal the valuables for themselves. Instead, they destroyed them. Their goal was not simply looting. They wanted to demonstrate their hatred for the corruption and inequality they believed dominated English society. The destruction of the Savoy Palace sent a powerful message to the ruling class. The old order was being challenged. The king agrees to meet the rebels. As violence spread across London, the young king, Richard II, realized he had few options. Military forces inside the city were limited, and confronting thousands of rebels directly could lead to even more chaos. Instead, the king agreed to meet representatives of the uprising. The first meeting took place at Mile End, just outside the city. Thousands of rebels gathered to hear the king speak. Their demands were bold and revolutionary for medieval society. They wanted the end of serfdom, the system that tied peasants to the land of their lords. They wanted the freedom to work for wages wherever they chose, and they wanted the abolition of unfair taxes. Incredibly, the king appeared to agree. He promised reforms and issued charters granting freedom to many peasants. For a moment, it seemed as though the rebellion had succeeded, but the situation in London was far from resolved. The confrontation at Smithfield. The most dramatic moment of the entire revolt occurred the following day. Another meeting was arranged between the king and the rebel leader Wat Tyler. This meeting took place at Smithfield, an open area just outside London. Thousands of rebels gathered nearby, watching anxiously. Wat Tyler rode forward to speak with the king and his advisors. Accounts of the conversation vary, but it is clear that tensions were extremely high. Tyler reportedly spoke boldly, demanding further reforms and greater freedoms for the peasants. Some nobles at the meeting were outraged by his behavior. They believed he was speaking to the king with unacceptable arrogance. Suddenly, the situation escalated. During the confrontation, one of the king's officials attacked Tyler. In the chaos that followed, Wat Tyler was severely wounded. He was captured and killed shortly afterward. The leader of the rebellion was dead. A moment of incredible courage. For a brief moment after Tyler's death, the situation could have exploded into full-scale violence. Thousands of armed rebels were standing nearby. They had just watched their leader killed in front of them. The royal guards were heavily outnumbered. But in an extraordinary moment, the young king acted decisively. Riding forward toward the rebels, Richard II reportedly addressed them directly. He declared that he would personally become their leader and promised that their concerns would still be addressed. His boldness surprised the crowd. The rebels hesitated. Without Tyler to guide them, their movement suddenly lacked direction. Gradually, the crowd began to disperse. The rebellion was losing its momentum. The aftermath of the revolt. Once the rebel army began to dissolve, the royal government quickly moved to regain control.
Promises that had been made during the negotiations were withdrawn. Charters granting freedom to peasants were canceled. Royal forces began arresting participants in the revolt. Many rebels were executed as punishment. Although the uprising had briefly threatened the stability of the kingdom, the monarchy ultimately survived. But even though the revolt had been suppressed, its impact could not be erased. The events of 1381 had revealed something powerful. The lower classes of medieval England were capable of organizing, protesting, and challenging authority on a massive scale. The ruling class would never forget that lesson. Conclusion: the revolt that shook medieval England. The Peasants Revolt of 1381 remains one of the most dramatic moments in English medieval history. For centuries, peasants have lived under strict social rules that define their place in society. Yet, for a brief and extraordinary moment, ordinary people challenged that system. They marched on the capital, they forced the king to negotiate, and they proved that even in a rigid medieval hierarchy, the voices of the poor could not always be ignored. Although the revolt ultimately failed to achieve all its goals, it exposed the growing tensions within English society. Those tensions had been building ever since the devastating arrival of the Black Death decades earlier, and they would continue shaping England's future for generations to come. Now, I want to ask you something. If you had been a peasant in medieval England, struggling with taxes, labor laws, and limited freedom, would you have joined the revolt, or would you have stayed home, hoping the storm would pass? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the dramatic stories of medieval Britain, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more journeys into the past.